to talk about HR stuff.
Well, I want to say hi to everybody. I haven't had necessarily the chance to work with all of you, but I work in our HR consulting space as well as doing human resources for our firm in general. So Tim and I and Wes and I work a ton together and trying to help figure out how we can support clients like you guys in that Venn diagram that is HR and payroll. So how many of you have either HR responsibilities or are very close to having the HR space? So like a lot of people, okay. So what I'm gonna go through with you guys today, and I knew that this was a payroll focused world, was to talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls where HR and payroll overlap. And a lot of times in that overlap, it's we're duplicating something, I'm doing it and you're doing it, or nobody is doing it because I thought you were doing it and you thought I was doing it. So there's some real things to pay attention to here, and so we'll talk through these. If you have questions throughout, ask them, or we can stop at the end to ask questions, but I know that some of these get, just like some of the other topics we did, a little bit sticky, so just like just press the button.
You did it.
I did it, guys. These clickers tend to be trouble for me. So what I'm hoping is you'll be able to recognize some of these back in your organizations, like, ooh, this is something we talked about, and understand the risks associated. Payroll, we say a lot, is not always super exciting, no offense. Either is HR, but highly, highly legislated and a really big deal to people because it's their pay and it's their livelihood. So everything is very scrutinized. So hoping to help you guys understand some of the risks that on that HR side of payroll that you might be up against. I put some real case studies and some real examples throughout. A few of them I redacted the name because I think there might be people in the room that were at the village or the municipality that were using at a case study. And then just give you guys some strategies to mitigate it. So like, oh, okay, great, Megan, I understand all these risks, but what do I do about it? So we have some of those as well. Why does this matter? And I know you guys probably know this, and I know there might be a few people in this room that aren't local government specific. It matters a lot because of open meeting laws and FOIAs and the heightened public and media scrutiny that can happen when you're dealing with the public money, you know. And one of the case studies will go through the part of the risk to them, and part of what was really damaging to them was the public attention that the errors created. And so it has an extra level of scrutiny when you're working in the government space. So we're going to go through 5 pitfalls. Some of them are a little meatier than the others. The first 2 are the meatiest because while I still have most of your attention, I want you to focus on these 2, and the other 3 will be a little bit shorter. As we go through each one, I will stop for questions after each pitfall, or you can save them for the end if something comes up. Lack of segregation of duties. This is one of the biggest issues between HR and payroll. A lot of organizations, a lot of local governments are really small, and so one person is wearing 3, 4, and 5 hats. And that can cause a lot of risk and a lot of problem when we don't have any oversight or any differential between payroll and HR. Does this mean that you have to have 2 full-time employees? Because you're all looking at me like, well, we don't have a head count for that. No, this is where you have a check and balance, even within the finance department, or you have Tim, or you have me on the other side that's coming in and checking on things and just making sure things are in compliance. So that doesn't mean, and I'm not suggesting you have to have 2 separate departments in small organizations, but what I am suggesting is, if you can't, how can we build that? So some of the risks when we have lack of segregation is under training. Most of the time, if that's the case, it means you came up training in this side and you had to learn this side, or you came up training in this side and you had to learn this side, and you might not really know all the details of both. If somebody leaves and they're doing both, there is a huge disruption, and we can't have payroll disruption. Our people need to get paid. So you have a hole there. And then potential for fraud and lack of trust. So I like to assume that most people are not trying to defraud their employers, but this is a real risk that you leave open. And whether somebody has taken advantage of it or not doesn't mean that the lack of control doesn't open up that risk. So this is a case study, 2019, City of Baltimore, Maryland. They had a ghost employee scheme, so payroll and HR were not separated. The same person was doing both. That means they hired the person, they onboarded the person, they put the person into payroll, they went into the payroll system and put the rates in, and they processed payroll for a person that didn't exist. And it took 2 years to catch that. Because who would catch it? It's their own, it's them, and then it's them over here, and then it's them getting paid. So the lack of control, because there was no separation, there was no check and balance there, created a real risk. This was very public for them, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And people lost their jobs. So, what are some mitigation efforts? So these are like the so what's of what we can do about some of these things, and especially in a world where we can't necessarily have these big robust systems and lots of people working in it. Have somebody, whether it's HR or whether it's their individual manager, handle the onboarding in their file, where finance would handle payroll, the processing of payroll, reconciliations, W-2s. So there is this check and balance between two different people. Have an approval process for workflow changes in the payroll system. This is probably the one that I would say is the biggest thing that you could do today, is quarterly audit it. Whether you do it yourself and pull an internal audit, whether you ask one of us for help, but take a random sampling and just make sure there's no ghost employee. If you do this on a quarterly basis, and your duties aren't as segregated as you'd like, you at least have an opportunity to catch those things before they get too far. And system access controls, when people leave, when people go to different roles, don't let them continue to have access to the systems at the payroll or HR level. The more people who have access to things, the more people can make the change over here and then also make the change over here. Then you're tying it to itself instead of truly external tying. And cross-training, this really speaks to what happens when somebody quits and they were the person doing everything and now people need to get paid tomorrow. Making sure that somebody in the organization outside of the person that is actually doing it is trained to do it so that you don't have a disruption in service to your employees. Best practice. So for each of these, we wrote a best practice statement to try and just give a clear, in a perfect world, this is what it would look like, right? And we have those mitigation efforts. We're probably none of us, including Lauterbach and Amon, living in the perfect world. But best practice would be if you don't separate HR and payroll duties, you have a significant control and compliance risk. So HR should manage employee data and authorizations, while payroll would be independently processing and verifying pay. So HR is taking that employee piece, what benefits changed? Did you have a qualified life event? Did you get hired? Are you on a leave and your pay gets deducted? And then payroll is independently processing those numbers in the payroll system. Questions on that one? Okay. I know that Tim already said he had the only hot topic. And then also Erica said she had a hot topic. And Evan didn't have a hot topic, or I'm not sure. But I-9 compliance is really also a hot topic right now. And this lives in HR and it also lives in payroll sometimes. So I want to talk about this a bit, and it's why the slide has more words. This is just as less words as I could put. Employees that are in charge of doing I-9s are not trained to do so, and you are out of I-9 compliance. Angela, who's sitting in the first row, she works in HR consulting with me. We used to say, even like 4 years ago, you have some risk here, but what is the chance of ICE actually knocking on your door? That has changed. There is real risk with that. I would never say that anymore. There is real, true risk of this getting audited on a daily basis. So making sure you have your I-9s in order and that going forward they're being done appropriately is actually, it's a real risk right now. So what is the risk? ICE audits and raids, and the reputational damage that comes along with that. Those are very public, I mean, you guys have the news. It's a very public situation. Significant fines. So local governments are not exempt from the federal fines related to immigration compliance. You can get fined up to $3,000 per form error for missing forms, up to $25,000 per violation if they can prove that you knowingly hired an unauthorized worker. And even technical errors, like clerical errors, like oops, I put December 11th instead of December 10th, or I forgot to sign this, or it was a day late, has a lot of fine exposure as well. It doesn't just have to be a missing form, even errors within the form. Where does this matter? Again, it matters in a raid, it matters in a fine under an audit. It also matters for grants. So especially your public safety or infrastructure programs, they require affirmation of immigration compliance and that you have no outstanding violations with your immigration compliance. So a finding of non-compliance could impact your current funding and it could impact your ability to submit applications in the future. So there's some real risk on this one. So what can we do about that? Let's look at Annapolis, Maryland. They were smart and they did an internal I-9 audit in 2021. 25, from their own internal audit, 25% of their employees had no I-9 on file at all. And then the ones that did had incorrect documentation, which is a risk as well because you're carrying PPI that you shouldn't be. Had they not done this internally and fixed it themselves, I just told you it could be up to $3,000 for a missing one, 25% of their employees, and they had other errors on top of it. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines. They lost a lot of time correcting errors. They had to call, every employee back in and redo their I-9s, and it caused it was a very public situation handled in a board meeting that caused some reputational damage and for some people to be removed from their roles. Mitigation efforts. Centralized I-9 completion and oversight is important. A lot of times we see hiring managers do that piece. Oh, like I'm going to be with them on their first day, so I'll fill out section 2. If people aren't trained to do that correctly, that really is a risk. And so either centralizing it and having your HR or finance person be able to do those pieces within the first 3 days, or if you have a group of hiring managers that are going to take on that responsibility for your organization, making sure they are properly trained. Angela and I did an I-9 audit for a very large and very prominent Illinois suburb, and the amount of errors, they had an HR team of 5, and the amount of errors that we found that would have been risk to them if they hadn't done it internally, it's shocking. And I don't think it's like people are meaning to do that. There's just a lot of intricacies in how to fill out that form. So you can consider a compliant electronic system. There are some systems where you can do I-9s electronically that will send reminders, that will, alert when you're coming up on your 3 days. Or you can consider E-Verify. There's pluses and minuses to both of those options. E-Verify isn't required for everybody, but it does give you the peace of mind that it's being handled in a timely manner, and that if there's an error in what you're submitting, the system won't allow it. Providing that training for employees that are tasked with any I-9 activities, and conducting periodic internal audits. I would say a periodic internal audit would be like super important, like now, would be pull out your I-9s and make sure you have one for all of your employees. Make sure you don't have ones you shouldn't have, because you're not supposed to keep them forever. And because over-documentation is a risk, right? If you have it, then you have to turn it over, and then you're carrying PPI that you shouldn't be. So best practices, is maintain a centralized and consistent process. Make sure all departments that are involved are trained in this. And all new hires fill out their form, and this is everybody, right? Interns have to fill this out, part-time. Anybody that you are paying through payroll, you need to check to make sure that they are an authorized worker. They should be completed on or before the first day, but definitely within 3 days of employment is the rule. And so these are things I would suggest, like, I think it's a hot topic, that you look at now. Yeah.
When you say don't keep them forever, how long do you keep them?
You keep them a year after their termination.
Okay.
And
Active employees you would have them.
active employees you have to re-verify employees if they've left within the year and they come back, like an intern. You can re-verify that section 3. They don't have to do a new form. They can, but you do have to re-verify on their new hire date. And then, yes, you need to purge the ones that are for people who have left over a year ago. And having that on file is actually finable and a risk. Yeah.
Does that include like seasonal, that I mean, they're gonna be coming back, they take care of a garden, so they're same employees, but they just don't work over the winter, would we have to re-verify that?
You should re-verify if it's been a year.
It's not, it's like.
If within the year, then no, you're okay. But then on their third round, they probably are over a year, right? And then you probably would re-verify at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have employees that have been around for like 30 years, 40 years, one person even 50 years.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure they don't have 99 in there.
So 1986 is when I-9 immigration laws went into effect, which means technically any employee from 1986 on should have one. So yeah, I probably would, 5 years ago, no, I wouldn't have suggested you have to go back that far, but I would. If you still have an active employee, then yeah, I would go ahead and have them fill out an I-9 and have that on file. Yeah.
So do those I-9s need to go in their personnel files after that? or-
No.
Okay.
In fact, they may not go in their personnel
Well,
files.
just
Yeah.
like for police then, you have to keep all their records. So is that something that you have to keep separately with their
Yes.
stuff
Yes.
until forever?
Yes, so how that works is I-9 should be stored separately, and I mean, we recommend in like alpha order. Some people do it in date of hire order or date of term order so they know when to pull a chunk out. They do not reside with the files, with their personnel files at all.
But for police, you need to keep all their documents forever now. So is that something you have to keep separate?
You know, I'm not sure if, because you're working on both state and federal
Right.
legislation there. Let me get back to you on that one. I'm not
And
sure.
what if you have that in your destruction? It's on my destruction.
In your document
sheet,
destruction
right.
policy, yeah, that you would keep it forever. Is on your
Right.
policy?
I think it's in the, well, yeah, I think it's originally, it's in the personnel file.
Even if it's, yeah, even if your policy says that, this would override that. Yeah, those need to be pulled out of personnel files. Now, on the how, do you keep them after termination for police, given that legislation? That I'm not sure, and I'll get back to you on that. Yeah. Is there another question? I thought I saw a hand. No, okay. Certainly something to pay a lot of attention to right now. It's something that we can help with. They're very intricate, and it is not fully rocket science, so things we can get in order. Another thing I would say, making an effort goes a long way in these situations. So if you have done an internal audit and you have made the changes that have been recommended to be made, and you write a memo saying we did an internal audit, this is what we did, these are the changes we made, and you keep that in your file, that effort does go a long way when you're being audited to being able to get abatement of some fines. So. This one's way less exciting. Well, the rest of them are less exciting. We've peaked on our hot topic level. But this relates to some of the things that Tim talked about this morning. Failure to stay current, or how do you stay current with legislative changes? There are payroll legislative changes and there are HR legislative changes that happen all the time. And not staying current with them, not sitting in this room and coming to training, not having a industry group or a newsletter that you follow could lead you to being out of compliance. Some of these things, and more so than I've ever seen in my career, have started happening way faster. Like, it got approved today, and in a month, you need to enact it. And usually there were these longer years of putting things into place, and that's a lot less true now. So making sure that you have a way to get that information and that you can accurately capture and implement those changes. So without that, you can be in lack of compliance with FLSA. This is what Tim was just talking about, with your state wage laws, IRS requirements, pension fund rules, and union contracts. So making sure that you have a system, a capture system for the changes that happen legislatively is important. It is not a defense to say I did not know. That wouldn't hold up under audit. To say, like, I just didn't know that OBBBA happened. That won't work. So a few examples that are very recent that I would want to point out. A few years ago, oh, Tim, see, I did it too, but not with the B's, the S and the L are switched. A few years ago, the thresholds for exemptions changed significantly. They had not gone up with inflation, and so that level that said what you can get paid via an exempt employee went up a ton. It was actually proposed 2 years prior to that to go up even like double that number. And it got pulled the day before it was supposed to be implemented. So an ability to keep tabs on that, no, did it go through, did it not go through, do I have to change my pay system, do I not have to change my pay system, staying on top of those things are important. PLAWA, Paid Leave for All Act, it doesn't impact everybody in this room, but it impacts a good number of you. Making sure that was implemented, making sure it was implemented correctly, another one to stay on top of. And the OBBBA impacts, and that's a lot of what Tim talked about this morning, but knowing what you need to do and what you need to do for 2026 and what you do or don't need to do for 2025. So making sure to stay timely on those things. I would establish, and like these are very formal words, but I would establish a legislative monitoring process. To me, that means there's somebody in your office who is in charge of having those newsletters, going through them, combing through updates, and making sure that you're compliant, or at least flagging the ones that might be relevant, for further review. So that is definitely a mitigation effort I would suggest. I think this is, again, a place where if I think you're doing it and you think I'm doing it and nobody knew about PLAWA, now we're out of compliance. Join an industry group, whether that's some of our local ones, whether it's sitting in this room, having those people and those relationships across other organizations where you can pick up the phone and say, what are you guys doing with this new overtime thing? Are we doing this for 2025? What's everybody up to? Provides a lot of support in these. Making sure that those new things get captured appropriately in your handbook or your policies or your required notices and documentation. So making sure those things get captured. I'll give you a second to read best practices, but being aware and making sure that you have the ability and the information coming into you to be aware, and if you don't, making sure you sign up for a few of those newsletters, making sure you have a process in place for that so you don't miss something. Number 4, documentation related. Tim just talked about all the different ways that we calculate overtime pay, and some of it is a little bit subjective. And if you didn't document how you did it, and you can't right back into your own number, you automatically have a problem. So if records aren't kept consistently, or it all lives in one person's brain because we're a small organization, and I remember what I did for that calculation, you're at risk. And whether that's payroll or HR documentation or the combination of those two, not having them kept consistently or in a centralized location, whether that's file drawers or online file drawers, is a risk to the organization. So why You get audit findings, you can't substantiate something you did, and maybe you did it right, but you can't substantiate that you did it right. Can lead to financial statement notes and management letters. So, like that little asterisk on your compliance. A lot of times this leads to more tactically things like you pay somebody twice because you don't remember if you paid them for that leave, or you didn't really document how you calculated it and they were questioning it, and so now you end up having an incorrect number that you have to fix. Oh look, this was before overtime errors, right? Or incorrect accruals of vacation time, holiday time, sick time. As well as operational inefficiency, because you are in fact recreating the wheel every time you do any of these processes if you're not documenting it when you do it. So this is a pretty important one as well. Large city Illinois, which this is a positive example. So this is not look what bad happened to them, but they were able, because of their documentation, to get out of something. I say large city Illinois because this is a local one that is a client of ours, but in 2019, a pretty significant wrongful termination claim got dismissed thanks to some very tight record keeping and consistent documentation. So they were able to save that lawsuit from happening because of how well records were kept and how accessible they were. So when attorneys came, when documents got subpoenaed, they were able to pull very thorough records. So mitigation efforts require document approvals for payroll change, stipends, overtime, personnel actions, all of those things, document it. If you have an approval process that creates that audit trail, that documentation history. Make sure that you are unified across internal people and police, and making sure that even though there are different departments that are doing different things in their onboarding, that you have some unified and written process for how to onboard payroll entries and keeping their employee records up to date. That no matter what department they're in, there is some unified process so that documentation is happening regardless of what department they're in. And then making sure you're training, whether it's your HR people, payroll, or your department supervisors on documentation requirements and why they're so important. You never think you're going to need it until you need it, and then you're like, I was in that meeting, and you're going back calendar invites to try and figure out what day that meeting was and jog your memory on what was discussed. So you'll see a theme in some of these best practices, and I pull them together at the end to say standardization is a big part of the themes. Making sure that you have standardized process, so no matter who's touching it, it's going to be treated similarly. This is the last one, and this one really does start to go a little bit more into the HR space, but I think it's still applicable to payroll because some of the things that I see get done unequally are done in the payroll space, like who we give a leave to or who we offer bereavement to, and not treating those things consistently. So the pitfall is unequal treatment without justification. We don't have a reason. We just, this person works in this department. She sits next to me. I see her all the time, and so I remember to tell her to fill out that paperwork for her leave, and we don't really have a process, so this guy over here, I forgot to. It doesn't even have to be with malicious intent, but just lack of process that relates to this. Discrimination claims, union grievances, and employee turnover are your real risks here. You treat one person differently, one person gets access to a benefit that somebody else doesn't get. You think you're just doing a nice thing. You broke your leg, so go ahead and take a few extra days off, but when this person breaks their arm tomorrow, if we don't do the same thing, we could have a discrimination claim. We could have a union grievance. So making sure that we are treating people by our policy, regardless. So a case study on this one, this was again a more local sheriff's office, and this happened in 2022. I try to keep the examples as recent as possible because these are things that are truly happening right now. There were 2 deputies that were disciplined differently for the same infraction. And there was no record, back to our 4th pitfall, for why. Nobody could support why there was no reason that should have happened. So then it appears to be favoritism. And a $250,000 back pay was awarded to the deputy who did not get the same treatment. So there's like real precedent here for what happens when people aren't treated the same. Mitigation efforts, you will continue to see some themes here. Training, making sure that your supervisors and department heads that aren't sitting in the payroll and HR space with you all the time, that they know what the policies are, or they know enough to know when to pull you in. That you conduct periodic audits of your disciplinary actions. So every now and again, you pull those files and make sure that this person was, followed the leave act, and so did this person. Use standardized forms and workflows. If you have to get it into a system that's standardized, the system will flag for you if something isn't being treated appropriately. And requiring consistent documentation for decisions. Why was this treated as workers' comp in this situation but not workers' comp in this situation? Maybe there's a real answer for that. As long as it's documented, that should be okay. If you don't document it, it looks like unequal treatment. Apply policies consistently. Make sure your policies are clear and written. You can't apply them consistently if they don't exist. Use standardized process and centralize the review of those documents. Centralize those employee issues that come through to make sure that they are being treated fairly. So what's your general prevention framework? We walked through 5, right, pitfalls. Some of them are like pretty timely pitfalls. That's why we go through them in detail. But there are more than 5 HR and payroll pitfalls. There's like 500. So how do you mitigate against that in general? What are some of the best practices for the payroll HR departments? One is to make sure your policies and job descriptions are updated regularly, that they do cover things that have changed recently, that they do have PLAWA in them, so that your employees, your supervisors, and your office team are working with the same set of rules. There should be an annual manager and or elected leader training. And that feels like a lot. And that's a production to put on. But making sure that everybody in your organization that's touching any of this knows what's important will prevent issues in the future. Standardize, 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 document, document, document. Making sure that you have those processes in place so that if somebody leaves your organization, somebody else can pick it up before payroll doesn't happen. Make sure that you have a formal complaint handling protocol so that someone from HR or somebody from the elected leadership group is involved when there's employee discipline so that there is consistent treatment of people. We recommend like a general HR audit every few years. Is it 2, is it 3, is it 5? I can't give you an exact number, but in general, having somebody from the outside come in and just take a procedural look at how you're doing things and let you know if there's any glaring holes. And then regular compliance checks for yourself to make sure that the legal requirements are being met. So most of these were scattered throughout mitigation efforts on all of our pitfalls, which means if we do these things, we can be concerned less about the pitfalls because we trust our process, we trust our documentation, we have the right controls in place. So, key takeaways, small HR and payroll errors can become public crisis. People care a lot about their pay. People care a lot about their livelihood. And so even small things, even things that are not necessarily malicious in intent or fraudulent in intent, can still have a very public impact on your organization. Proactive measures are cheaper than legal battles. So yes, an annual training feels like a lot, or making sure that every hiring season for seasonal people that we refresh ourselves on how to do all those I-9s feels like a lot. It's a lot cheaper than a legal battle. And document, document, document. Consistency, training, this is your best defense. Questions? Or should you have another HR question, that would be allowable as well.
Something, I think it was mentioned earlier, it's seasonal employees, did you say that after 3 years, you still have to do a new I-9?
No, so what you have to do is, it's section 3 of the I-9 form. If an employee leaves and comes back after a year, you have to re-verify them. And so it's not a full redo of the I-9, but it's like a check to say like, is everything still true?
It's only if it's been a year. So
Yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing about seasonals coming back year after year.
No, one thing I would say with seasonals is make sure that their backup documentation hasn't expired. So what I see a lot with like seasonal employees that are young, like maybe they turn 21, they get a new driver's license. So you do want to make sure that their backup documentation hasn't expired when they return, even if it's within a year.
That's a good point. That especially also matters if you have employees on some kind of work visa, some kind of H-1B status employees. Those documents, you need to be aware of when they expire and make sure that you are following up on those regardless of the timeline of when they are or aren't coming back. Even if they've remained a full-time employee for the whole time, knowing when those ones expire is important. If we came in for an audit and you had somebody who was on some kind of work status and their documents expired and they never did anything about it and now they're still employed with you but they are technically no longer authorized to work, that's a huge risk to your organization. Yeah?
If you have a full-time employee who's
Yeah.
stayed with you the whole time, they're not on a work visa or anything
Yeah.
like that, if their backup documentation, so like they have a driver's license,
Mhm.
let's say, they need to renew that in 2027, should we be requesting that?
No, no.
No.
For full-time employees who have stayed on the whole time, there has been no change. Yes, they're not on some kind of work authorization. They were fully authorized and permanently authorized. No, you don't have to continue to do that.
So just so I have it, so it's seasonals
Mhm.
who maybe don't need to be re-verified if they are coming back within a year, but their backup documentation
Has expired. Mhm. Yeah, that would be what you want to look out for. Yeah.
What records were helpful in the dismissal of the wrong information?
Yeah, so it was detailed notes of the conversations that had happened. And those notes were created as the conversation was happening or after the conversation was happening, not once the attorney called. And the notes not only lived in HR, but they had been emailed to the people who were in the conversation. So if I had a performance conversation with Evan, and I had Angela in the room with me, I know, scary, right? I would take notes and then I would send it to both of them and say, these are the notes of the conversation we just had. Having that third person, or having the person on the email that was the person being spoken to, what it indicated in that lawsuit was that they knew. They were aware of what was happening because there was an email trail for it. So yeah, it was documentation of those conversations. Yeah.
If you have that sort of documentation in an email, but it doesn't get put into like a performance, a formal discipline that goes into the HR file, then is that documentation still
Yes.
good?
Yes, that would still be good. It's not best practice to not put it there, but if you miss one and it's not in the file and it's not in the, it didn't make it through, you can still provide that as part of your backup in that situation. Yeah.
Back to the I-9.
Yeah.
So would an employee that's like on a full or beyond a full year leave of absence, do we have to do anything special when they come back, or are they still considered?
No, as long as they weren't terminated, they're still considered an active employee. The only time I would caveat that is if they were on a work immigration status where there was a documentation that, that they changed or something expired. But otherwise, no, leave of absence is still an active employee. Yeah.
So I have a question with the I-9, going back to like our public works plow drivers. They're
Yeah.
full-time employees, they're not seasonal. Is that required, when if one of them went out and got a DUI over the weekend and doesn't have a
So this is policy driven, and this isn't even just I-9, but this is really comes down to your employment requirements. Most handbooks will leave some opening to say that there can be ongoing checks, background checks. You still have to let them know you're doing it, and or drug testing that can be done randomly. If your handbook allows for that, you can do that. You cannot, though, it could be deemed discriminatory. If you were to just say, I feel like you got a DUI this weekend, so I'm gonna go ahead and check it. Yeah, I heard, so I'm gonna go ahead and check it. A really good way of handling that is to have a policy that says you do have to tell us, because if somebody doesn't, then that could be a terminatable offense. So it is the employee's burden to tell you if something has changed. But no, really, there is no way for your ongoing employees, and you have no reason to believe differently, that you might not know. And so that's why we recommend that as a policy. But I would always say having your handbook give you the opportunity to check that if and when you need to leave that open for you. Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate on that. Our police chief has just informed me that the police go and verify everyone's driver's license through the DMV on an annual basis, like in December or January, to make sure that situation doesn't exist.
So there are some caveats when it comes to collective bargaining. And usually that is covered in a CBA agreement with police, and that would be allowable in a public safety role. Awesome. So there's a lot here. There's a lot when it comes to HR and payroll and how they intersect, or just HR in general, and you're stuck with HR duties and you don't know what to do. Certainly always feel free to reach out. We can talk through whether you have questions on the slides or questions on anything else. Certainly here to help. But it was great getting to talk to you guys today. Thank you so much for your participation.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. There you go. I just wanted to actually throw out a quick thought. When you had mentioned the documentation pitfall, one bullet point that may have been slightly missing is turnover in payroll position especially. We see this all the time where your payroll person leaves either unexpectedly or somewhat quickly. And if the payroll process is not well documented, the chance for errors or delays or problems is just multiplied exponentially. So just throwing out yet another reason to maintain good documentation. At this point,